Well, good morning, and thank you, Micah. What a wonderful song, and opening prayer, too. Wherever God is, I am. So my name is Reverend Bob Brach. I'm your guest speaker for today. And let's open in prayer. I invite you to close your eyes. Feel the presence of the chair under your body, your feet on the floor. Know that wherever we are, God is. Wherever we are, God is. And we know that God is present right here in this beautiful little sanctuary within each and every one of us, within the city of Stockton, state of California, and in the world. And we open our minds and hearts as we listen to this wonderful service today, the beautiful music we're having, and the message that I'll be given later on, and all the other little bits and pieces like our daily word that maybe will be speaking directly to your heart. And with a grateful and thankful heart, all God's children said together, thank you, God. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the reminder. So I'm Susan Dyhep. I'm one of your board members, and so I get to be your platform person this morning. And I do want to take a chance to introduce our people that are serving you. So we have Reverend Bob Brach. Welcome back. Reverend Margie's spiritual half-husband. And Michael Lawson, music. Glenn Gomez is our technician. And also your prayer chaplain today. And our usher is Willie Smith.
Hey, Willie.
And welcome to all of you. Welcome also to people that are joining us online. Okay, so why don't we say our vision statement together? We are an expanding community of conscious evolvement, bringing timeless wisdom. We are all who are in search of a higher purpose and a greater connection to the divine presence in each of us. Wonderful. And now our mission. Unity Center Stockton's mission is to raise awareness and understanding of unity principles and universal truths, which inspires a higher level expression of living. And thank you, Deborah, for the flowers. No apologies for bringing us flowers. That comes to, we have our refilling the vase. And if anybody wants to...
I may be late, but I like doing this.
Oh, well, we are happy to let you continue to bless us with flowers. I can see the tops of them. I'm not blessed with height, but I'm grateful for what I have. So why don't we take a little time to say hello and meet and greet. All righty. You guys settled down fast? So our announcements really are stay tuned. We will be re-engaging our spiritual activities. We're just finding out who's going to be serving and who is willing and getting the details down. So we're in a midweek hiatus right now, and we're just taking it as we're finding it out day by day.
But the Course of Miracles is still continuing.
That's correct, Dawn. I'm sorry. Yeah, because that hasn't been, it is, the Course in Miracles is, and Dawn can give you more information. It meets on Zoom twice or three times a week. So, yeah, 3 times a week.
On Monday, tomorrow morning at 11:30, and in the morning until for an hour and a half. And then Wednesday evening, for an hour and a half, starting at 7 in the evening. And if you speak Spanish, you can, it's on Friday, I have to check on the time. But
Yeah, so Course in Miracles is continuing, and we'll find out more about our regular weekly activities. And when we know, we'll pass it on. Okay, how about our daily word? So if you want to get settled in your chair and it feels comfortable, close your eyes so you can take in the message. The word for today is healing. Divine life lives as me. I am whole and well. When I am experiencing a healing need, I focus my thoughts beyond illness and discomfort. Even as I seek treatment for the injury or illness, I see myself whole. I remember that I am created in the image according to the likeness of God. I know that my life is God's life, living as me. Divine life fills every cell, strengthens every muscle, bone, and organ, and quickens every nerve in my body. It restores perfect order to all my body's functions, releasing and replacing anything unlike itself. When someone asks me to pray for them, I do not ask about their symptoms or circumstances. I affirm the healing activity of divine life in each one with whom I pray. I see them as the spiritual beings they are, whole and well. In him was life, and the life was the light of all people. John 1:4. And now we'll have some music to prepare for meditation.
as we move into our period of meditative reflection, we let that music just play on our soul and our hearts, calling us to that connection and meditation. And I invite you to sit comfortably on your chair, feel your feet on the floor, feel the support of that chair, knowing that that chair is there to support us, whether you're here in our sanctuary or at your home in front of your computer, knowing that that chair supports you, and also knowing that the Spirit is always present. There is one presence, one power, God the good, active in our lives and in the universe. And that Spirit is fully present. And I invite you to take a nice, gentle breath of air in and follow that air down into our chest area. And let our attention focus on our heart, that wonderful physical organ that sends blood to each and every cell of our being. And if there's any part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of Spirit, I invite you to see love-filled, Spirit-filled blood flowing from our heart center to that part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of Spirit. Seeing it bathe in a blue-white light bubble of healing, spiritual energy, bringing about the right resolution of healing and wholeness at the right and perfect time and in the right and perfect way. And if there's any person, place, thing, or event that needs that healing hand of Spirit in our lives, I invite you to see that very clearly in your mind's eye. And see that person, that place, that thing, that event, bathe in this blue-white light bubble of healing spiritual energy, bringing about the right resolution at the right and perfect time and through the right and perfect people. Now let's bring our attention back to our heart center again. And Jesus of Nazareth, when asked by his disciples, saying, "Lord, teach us how to pray," he told them to go within to the closet of their being, to shut the door to the outside world, and listen in the silence for the Father who speaks in a small, still voice, but rewards openly. So we've gone to the closet of our being, our heart center. We mentally shut the door to the outside world. And we take a few moments now and rest deeply in the silence and listen for that Spirit speaking in a small, still voice, or thoughts flitting across our mind, or images flashing across the screen of our mind, as we gently rest in the silence. And now we bring our awareness back to our physical bodies, whether we're sitting here in the sanctuary or at home in front of our computer screen. And perhaps in this time of silence, we heard something like a small, still voice, or images flashed across the screen of our mind, or thoughts flitting through our mind about what is Spirit calling us to do today. Or perhaps not. But later today, maybe reading a book, seeing a billboard as we drive by on the highway, a call from a friend, a book we're reading, a movie we're watching. Spirit will have some wonderful way of speaking to us, because we know Spirit speaks in diverse ways and means. And now we gently open our eyes, become back fully present, for the rest of our service. Yay. Beautiful music, Michael. Thank you. I love that cello sound. Wow. I was telling Mike before the class, I have a tape like that on my Insight timer that I would use for my meditation at night. And then about 8 minutes long. Sometimes I do it in the middle of the night when I have to get up. And about 2 hours later, I wake up, my cell phone's on my chest, my glasses are on my face, and the thing is shut off. So, well, the talk today that I'm going to be giving is called Look for the Best. Look for the best. And I would be using material from a book by Lowell Fillmore, who's the oldest of the Fillmore boys. And the book is called The Prayer Way to Health, Wealth, and Happiness. It's kind of a follow-on of the talk that Margie did last week or so. And interestingly, I was doing a SEE class at Unity of Sacramento yesterday. It's an intensive, 5 hours yesterday and then 5 hours next Sunday. It's on overview of Christian scriptures. And I happened to mention Lowell Fillmore, and somebody said, who's that? So Lowell Fillmore is thank goodness he was there, because he was the oldest of the Fillmore boys. There's Lowell, Rickert, and John Royal. And he and Rickert were involved in the early days of helping get the magazine started. And for about 50 years, I think, he was the president of the Unity School of Christianity. He helped direct it and keep it going. He wrote for what's it called, the Weekly Unity. He wrote this thing, Metaphysical Musings, and he was responsible for getting the pamphlets in Spanish from Unity. But I talked with Phil Pearson, who's one of my mentors and friends, and Phil talked about meeting Lowell personally. And he said, man, he was a really quiet, well-mannered man. And Dorothy shared a little story. Dorothy Pearson, the late Dorothy Pearson, she said one time he was eating, they were having a luncheon, and Dorothy was introducing Lowell. And Lowell said something that he hadn't eaten meat in 30 years. His brother, Rick, was in the audience and said, well, I haven't had meat since breakfast. So not all the Fillmores were vegetarian. But, and the other thing on this book, when I was in ministerial school, I volunteered to be the student minister at the Unity Church in St. Joseph, Missouri, which is about an hour and a half north of Kansas City, Lee Summit area where we were living. And sometimes driving up there in the middle of the Missouri winters, I'm thinking, why did I step into this? It's interesting because a friend of mine was doing that job when he was in ministerial school. And I said, who's going to volunteer for that? Guess what? Never say never, because I ended up doing it and I loved it. And I would ask my classmates and ask Margie to fill in when I couldn't speak. And what I asked them to do was use a chapter, and in fact, I'd give them a chapter from this book of Lowell Fillmore's, The Prayer Way to Health, Wealth, and Happiness. And then trying to keep my classmates on track, because keeping ministerial students on track is a little bit like herding cats. So at least I know that they're given a definite unity-type message. And in this book, there's some things that really caught my attention. And Lowell had written this. He said, everyone devotes a good deal of time to seeing with his mind's eye either the good things that he would like to attain or unpleasant things that he would like to avoid. His mind may flit almost pleasantly for a time among good things, and then dart into the shadows of disturbing things. And once in a while, it may find itself spellbound by some possibly terrifying things. I think Lowell was reading my mind, because I sure as heck can do that. We spend a lot of time thinking, no matter what. And even in meditation, like this morning, I was sitting, I do like a 30-minute sit, and we cannot not think. So that's why in a meditation practice, you either focus on your breath, you can use a mantra, You can hum a little tune, but staying focused on one thing, because we cannot not think. So, and there are times when, I'll be going along good, thinking things, and all of a sudden my brain will reach back and say, Bobby, remember when you did that? Or if I've seen some disturbing image on TV, if something's coming up, I close my eyes, because my brain will say, oh, look, remember that thing? Why are you getting the icky things? It's like something wants to get me out of my good. And one paradox of our life is, sometimes that we think things we think about it and the things we want to avoid are the actual things that we need to actually take a good look at. Things that we don't want to see in us. The very things that we look at, that we know better of ourselves, we may have to take a closer look at that. And these thoughts come in many different ways. They can come in reoccurring thoughts, they come in reoccurring dreams, reoccurring feelings. And to me, these things are like messengers of what I should be taking a look at. And on these thoughts, there's also that emotions are tied with it. So maybe there's some emotions that we need to take a look at. And these thoughts are ways of Spirit saying, hey, Bobby, take a look at this. When we were in ministerial school, they suggested, both Margie and Margie went through a 2-year program, I went through a 3-year program. They suggested we have an outside counselor, either a psychiatrist or whatever, but somebody that we could talk to as going through this life-changing process called ministerial school, because it is life-changing. And I had this fellow, Dr. Jeff, and he was in Missouri somewhere outside of Kansas, the Lee Summit area. And one time, Jeff says to me, Bob, you have a catastrophizing mind. You take the worst thing that could happen and run down the road with it. And I was oh yeah, And I remember this one thing, we got something from the IRS, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to be audited. Again, when Margie and I first got married, we combined our incomes. Of course, we were both tithers, file our checks, and the IRS goes, nobody gives that much. So we got audited on our tithes. But, now we're all set with that. But, it was just a letter of just some general reminding thing. Or, Margie and I can get in a little argument. Oh my God, we're divorced. I'm living under the WX freeway in a box. It's like catastrophizing it. Lowell had gone and written this. The pictures in our mind, whether they be pleasant, disturbing, or terrifying, are the charts of our future life course. We must learn to make our mental picture good even when our present experiences seem to be bad. We can do this by seeing God as Spirit in every experience and greater than any outer aspect of it. Seeing God in everything. It's like one of my instructors, Dr. Tom Shepard, Reverend Dr. Tom Shepard, he used to call one presence, one power. He was former military. OP2, one presence, one power. OP2. So, seeing God present in each and everything. This morning I was reading the New York Times. I went, oh my God, God's present in that thing too. Because Margie's on a retreat. And had she been there, she would have said, are you in the oh my section again? Reading the paper going, oh my, look at that, sometimes the very things that we want to avoid and we look at, we end up bumping into. A friend of mine was learning to ride a bicycle. And he said, every time you look at that telephone pole that you want to avoid, he'd run into it. I've talked to friends that were motocross riders on motorcycles. They drive into a field, there's one boulder, and people run into it. And I had a good example of that. I was a driver education teacher after I got out of college. And we're driving down this one suburban street, and there was one car parked by the right-hand side. And I made the mistake of telling my student, now there's a car on the right side there. Make sure you steer clear of it. Next thing you know, she is right. I had to lift up and turn away from it. And I went, oh my God. I told her not to look at it. And she looked at it and she drove it to it. So from next time when we go down that street, I'd say, there's a car on the side of the road. Now you look at the left-hand curb and keep over there. Because what we tend to look at, we will draw to it. I was taking some horseback jumping lessons when I first got here in California, and my instructor would say, you look up over the jump, Bob. Look down. You go down. So, Lowell Fillmore had written this that caught my attention. My need is to fix my attention upon the omnipresence of God's goodness so that I will run into that heavenly condition. My need is to fix my attention upon the omnipresence of God's goodness so that I run into that heavenly condition. A lot of Unity centers that I visited, they'll have a pamphlet called The Golden Key. The Golden Key. Anybody remember seeing the Golden Key? No? Okay. Maybe they haven't put it out there. But it's a pamphlet that was written by Emmett Fox back in 1931. And the whole pamphlet's central thought is, stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. Stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. There was a good friend of Margie's that would go with us. She lived fairly close in Modesto. And if I'd be talking to her about something coming up and bugging me, she'd say, Bob, golden key it. Get your thought off that thing and think about God instead. So we get to do that. Changing our thoughts from the negative to a positive is something that's really hard to do as a metaphysician. But if we want something to happen in our life, we need to get rid of those negative things and focus on the positive. Because whatever we tend to focus on negative, oh my God. Because I've done that, and sometimes I'll make an offhand comment to Margie, and she'll say, do you really want that to happen? No. Alrighty, so Lowell went on with this. Now take your mind off those unpleasant things and put your trust in God, giving thanks because he is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, in spite of all appearances, and you will find a solution. Magnify God in your mind instead of magnifying negative ideas, and your problem will be solved. Doing this is about the most difficult thing a metaphysician has to do, yet it is the most necessary thing. I think Lowell was reading Emmett Fox. Magic magnifying mind. Wow. I've heard of that in a term from one of my other spiritual books. A magic magnifying mind. My mind will take and magnify something way down the road. I mentioned about the IRS thing or whatever, and it may not even happen. In fact, there is a affirmation that we use from Catherine Ponder. Margie and I will lay in bed at night, and she had made up a list from these Catherine Ponder books. And one of the affirmations is essentially, why worry about something? It will probably never happen. I heard a guy say, I've been through many terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened. So our mind can jump in there. As we move through our life, sometimes it takes a better part of our lifetime to figure out what our actual job in life is. And the one way we can know about our life, if we're feeling unhappy, depressed, or feeling sick or whatever, it might be a sign that maybe we're not doing what our life work is, and maybe take a hard look at what we need to change. Maybe it's going to another volunteer job, or taking a class, or doing something. When I left the military back in 1996, and that's some time ago, I was going to be a 20-year man in the Coast Guard. 20 years, 20 minutes, I'm out the door. Well, at the 20-year mark, I was making pretty good money. I liked what I was doing, so I stayed in for another 8 years or so. But comes time, you have to retire. And the military had a wonderful program called TAPS. I think the acronym was for Transition Assistant Program System. It's also, TAPS is one of the things they play on Army bases at the end of the day, where it closes down. And part of this TAPS training, we had to look at this book called What Color is Your Parachute? The Golden Parachute thing. And part of that is we had to make a list of all our past duty stations with all the good points that we really liked. So I had this list. and that's my future job. But there's no job title on the top. But I knew what that job needed to encompass. And as I look back through my life from now until present, that job title has changed, but some of those things that I really wanted in a job were there. So when we set our intention, wonderful things can happen. So if we use these wonderful tools that we have to find out where we are, where do we want to go, we can do it. And sometimes we have to look a little higher. The old-time sailors had a navigation technique called bobbing the light. Now, as a Coast Guard officer, I was assigned to a ship out of Boston. We drove into North Atlantic. And, I had Loran, we didn't have GPS yet, but Loran, we had radar, we had all these wonderful tools to tell us where we are. But when we're sailing close to the shore, I would occasionally use what these old-time sailors did called bobbing the light. Bobbing the light. On the nautical charts, if there's a lighthouse, it'll say the height of the light and the distance that you can see it at sea. So say there was a lighthouse that's 165 feet tall and be visible for 20 miles out at sea. Well, you can take that, and then on your ship, if you knew how high you were above the water, because you have the horizon, and on my ship, I was 42 feet above the water, plus my height, so about maybe 47 feet above. And if I knew roughly where the light should be, if I'm looking for it, if I stood up on this platform, looked up higher, and I saw it, and then when I stepped down and it disappeared, I knew I was at that point between 20 miles and 8 miles. So I was about 28 miles from this. And if I had a shot of bearing on it, I'd have a position. So sometimes as we move through in life, we need to bob the light. We need to look up higher. Came across a story about the Duke of Wellington, who had to look up higher. After the Duke of Wellington left his military and he was retired, every year he would have a banquet for the officers who served with him at Waterloo. And at this one particular banquet, the Duke had purchased this beautiful jewelry box. It was encrusted with diamonds, precious stones. And of course, he passed it around, and all the officers are oohing and ahhing, oh my God. Well, towards the end of the banquet, the Duke says, where's the box? Nobody can find the box, They're checking their pockets, whatever. They're looking under the tables, all over the tables. They can't find it. So somebody suggests, well, everybody should be searched. 2 officers objected. One, a junior officer down at the end there, and the Duke himself. He would not subject his officers to being such scrutiny. So the party goes away, and of course the other officer, he's the one people are looking at, saying, oh, probably he took it, whatever. So several days later, the Duke is checking his uniform, and he reaches in his pocket, and he finds the jewelry box, and he says, oh my God. So he hurries off to find this other officer to find out what happened. And he locates him. He's living in a poor part of the city, and he's got an very ill wife. So he tells him, hey, we found the box. I've had it in my uniform. And he says, well, why did you avoid suspicion, not want to be searched and put yourself under all this suspicion? And he says, well, sir, I had taken a good portion of my dinner and put it in a paper sack, and I had it in my pocket, which I was going to take home to feed my sick wife. So the Duke had to look up higher, because sometimes we judge things by appearances, don't we? So the Duke had to essentially bob the light, look up higher, to find this guy and realize what his true mission was. But he was helping a sick wife. And finally, I'm the Bible guy at the Unity Urban Ministerial School, so you got to have a Bible story. Yesterday I spent 5 hours with these folks talking about the New Testament, at least half of it, the first Gospels. Tomorrow we finish, next Saturday we do the rest of it. But the story that came to mind was from the Gospel of John, the last of the Gospels, the most mystical of the Gospels, the one that Charles Fillmore seemed to be drawn to the most. And it's in chapter 11, and it's a story about Jesus healing Lazarus. Now Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were a family, and Jesus knew them well. He loved them. And Mary and Martha sent a notice to Jesus saying, hey, Lazarus is sick. You need to come and heal him. And Jesus responds essentially saying, well, he's not sick unto death, and he stays 2 more days where he's at. So they show up, and of course Mary and Martha are going, Lord, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. He's in the tomb for 4 days now. And Jesus says, no, roll away the stone. And there's a line in the Bible, the King James Version, the shortest version and the vicious verse in the Bible, where Mary or Martha says, Lord, he stinketh. And it's interesting, 4 days. See, in the Jewish culture at the time, for 3 days your spirit hung around. But if you're dead 4 days, you are really dead. So anyway, they roll away the stone. And Jesus says with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus comes out. He's wrapped in the grave clothes, and he says, unbind him and give him something to eat. So one of the interesting tools that we have in Unity, we can look at these stories metaphysically. What do they mean in our consciousness? And when I look at this story, Lazarus is kind of an obstacle. Mary and Martha, the women generally represent our feelings, men represent our thinking. So something in my feeling nature is having problems with my thoughts. It's an obstacle. And Mary and Martha, the feeling natures, Martha was the one who was in the kitchen fixing the food, so that feeling of being in service for me. And Mary is the one that's kind of sitting at the Lord's feet listening, so one of attention. So those two feelings within my body are bumping up against this obstacle. And I'm trying to call the Christ, the Spirit within me, to come and help. But that Spirit may take some time. Take the time it takes, and takes less time. And the other thing, when the Spirit finally shows up to address this issue, it speaks in a loud voice. And in our throat, we have the power of power, one of the 12 powers that Charles Fillmore's enacted. Speaks with a loud voice. We use our vocal things about healing these obstructions or whatever, releasing it. So, I just love metaphysical Bible interpretation. I was telling my students at class yesterday, when I first showed up at the Modesto, I was coming from this fundamentalist church. And Reverend Larry Schellink was telling a story, giving a metaphysical interpretation about this Bible talk. And I went, I know exactly what that talk's about. Well, then Larry gives it this metaphysical interpretation. I went, wow, that's an entirely new way of looking at these things. And guess what? It can change. I can look at the same story tomorrow. And guess what? I'll be in a little different place in consciousness, so it may imply an entirely different message. And as we move through life, I think we need to distinguish between our intuition and opinions and judgment. Now, both of them are necessary for moving forward. But the thing about intuition is it feels in our body, our gut. Margie's great for me because most of us guys, we go, oh, yeah, okay. And then our minds jump in, and we go, I need to logically look at this, whatever. And Margie will always say, honey, what was your first thought? So now I learned to listen to that first thought about where I'm supposed to be going, what I'm supposed to be doing, and go on with that. So let's wrap this all up and kind of talk what we've been doing here. We looked at about material from Lowell Fillmore's book, the eldest of the Fillmore boys, Prayer, Way to Health, Wealth, and Happiness, something you can probably, it may even be on your shelf over there. And you can probably get it online too. We looked about catastrophizing minds and magnifying minds. We looked about what we look at, we tend to be drawing our life, like that Driver Ed story I shared with you about the pamphlet of Golden Key from Emmett Fox, Golden Key. Look at God instead of the thing. The further you look, you can see higher, like the Duke did when he looked and found that officer and his real reason for not being searched. And we looked at a metaphysical story about Jesus healing Nazareth, getting rid of those obstacles. So, dear ones, namaste, and thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm happy to show one up. We're just a phone call away, so thank you.
Thank you, Michael, so much. Can we give him a little more love? Your music just fills this space with such a beautiful, beautiful energy. And thank you, Reverend Bob. Take the time it takes when Spirit takes time. Yes. This is our offering time. So if you would hold in your hands what you would give, we can bless it together. Together, please. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God.
We bless these gifts and these givers, seeing them taken together, shaken, running over as they go back 20, 40,